Good morning, everybody, all my newfound friends, and the ones that I haven't met yet that have issues because life does. Uh, there is a tree. It's the tree of life. I kind of look at the Genesis tree of life as a person's road that they travel. A tree, the trunk goes straight up, but the limbs veer off one side to the other. Some go downwards, some twine around, and some are longer than others. And we wind up on these different winding roads, and then we get back into the middle because the only way to heaven is straight up. And where is heaven actually? I think it has. I remember when I was young, I used to think if I could connect my brain to my heart, that I would find peace. I still wonder if that might be true. I don't follow the crowd. I'm not a crowd follower. If I was, I wouldn't celebrate holidays. Being a crowd follower doesn't make me happy. I have to walk in this life alone. I have to walk in this life alone. I have to choose who I want to help me. I have to trust in the ones that I feel will help me. But even the ones that we feel may help us may disappoint us, because there's another thing that I have learned in life that, and it's very true, life really isn't always fair. And those times we have to learn to accept that humanity is not perfect either. Just like those doctors that misdiagnosed me, they are only human even though they think that they're superhuman. They're on ego trips, is what they're on, and they think they know it all. I had said before I don't have a high school diploma. I'm not sorry I don't. I'm actually pretty proud that I don't have one. I have a different degree. I didn't have time to think about school books. I had too much drama going on at home. I was in the class at that time. It was an experimental class back in the 60s for children that had problems at home. They knew who we were, but nobody ever called any child protection. I don't remember ever hearing about child protection. And we lived on the fifth floor of a apartment building, and especially on the weekends, there was a lot of drinking going on, a lot of violence, beatings, screamings, and nobody ever called the cops. They all turned a deaf ear. I guess hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Whoever made those monkeys up, that was the worst thing that they could have ever made up, because that's what a lot of people do. They see no evil, they hear no evil, and they speak no evil. It takes somebody to come forward and speak that evil. Talk about your childhood, not to hurt your parents. We don't want to put our parents in a different light. We want other people to think that we had wonderful, wonderful parents when a lot of us didn't. A lot of us did. Me, I thought it was the norm to be yelled at every day, to be told I was stupid, to not allow to drop anything or I was clumsy. What they turned me into was a perfectionist. I had to walk on eggshells in my childhood. And I'm not saying this because I hate my parents. I do not. I don't I don't have any hatred at all for my parents because I know they suffered abuse as well. Abuse begets abuse. And if we can understand our parents, a good way for me to get to know how my parents felt back in those days with all the things that were going on in my house. And trust me, there was also uh, molestation. My father molested me. I don't know what he did to me. I know some things. I remember him sitting me on, I was sitting on his lap one day, and he was kissing me on my mouth. And I was probably about 11 or 12, and I didn't want him to kiss me. I wanted him to stop. I didn't like the feel of his saliva running down my chin and all over my mouth. But I was too afraid to tell him to stop because he would get mad at me. So that lets me know that he had done this other times before. All right. I evidently knew he would get mad. And when he finally let me up, I didn't run to my bedroom. I walked calmly. I did not want to see him see me running, because then he would have figured that I didn't like what he did. So I walked calmly behind my bedroom door, and with my sleeve, I wiped his saliva off of my mouth. Now, that memory had been stuffed for many years. I remembered it probably around 15, 20, about 15, maybe 20 years ago. My memory came back. I was seeing a therapist at the time. I've seen many therapists. I had to. My childhood was horrific, and anyway, I went to go see a therapist, and that's when this memory came back, and I validated it by calling my mother. I wrote her a letter first, but I couldn't wait, so I called her and I asked her. I said, "Mom," I said, "did Dad ever give me and Lori attention when we were little?" And she said, "Only when he was drunk." So that tells you a lot. A drunk man sometimes doesn't know what he's doing, or who he's doing what with. He also used to bring strange men home from the bar that he would meet. My mother told me this story. You know, she told me he would bring them home and let them sleep between me and my sister. And she said one night she walked in to check on us, and the man that my father had brought home was on top of my sister. And it took me many, many years to realize my mother's the one that told me the story, but she didn't stop it. She made me think, the way she put it was like as if it was my father's fault, but she didn't do anything to stop it. It shouldn't have happened, in other words. And I don't remember any child protective services or anything like that. I don't know if they had it back then. If they did, they certainly didn't enforce much enough. And I was abused in Catholic school. Catholic nuns abused me. When I was 5 years old, I didn't walk till I was 2, and I loved ice skating. And I would sit at my desk and go like this with both of my fingers on the table, acting like a couple, a man and a woman, ice skating on the table. And she caught me, and she told me not to do it. She gave me a warning not to do it again. But I had an imagination. I wasn't getting much love at home. I wasn't having much fun because all there was drinking and all that stuff, and yelling and screaming and craziness. And, I had an imagination. I wanted to have fun somewhere, Well, she caught me, and she took an actual rope, and she tied me with my hands behind my back, wrapped a rope around my body, and tied me like a hog to the chair. I remember looking around at all the other students, and they had a look of just absolute horror on their faces. And I don't know how I was looking. I don't know how I was. I was stiff as a board. I think I was so terrified. Imagine a 5-year-old being tied to a chair. But that's what They did. And you didn't go home and tell your parents because these were the people that we believed that they knew God and that they were righteous, when in fact it was child abuse. And the nuns used to, when we were so called bad, they would hit us with these big, long black straps that had grooves on it. They were made out of like a rubber. Uh, but you had to close your knuckles real tight, and they would slam you with that black strap until your knuckles bled. And if they didn't have the black strap available, a ruler would suffice. And it did the same basic damage. It sliced your knuckles all up, and you went home with bloody knuckles. Your parents didn't say nothing. There was no such thing. You know, uh, this is what it was like in the 50s and early 60s. It was horrific. Anyway, I used to sing, and I wrote my first song when I was 16 years old. And I'd like to share the words with you because when I look back at that song, to me it has maybe just as much or more meaning now than it did then. And it's called I Want to Be Free. Freedom. Does anybody know how to find freedom? I think I do. I think I do know how to find it, but it's not easy to find. But that's what my goal is at this point, is to be free, And I can understand now how Nelson Mandela managed to be a free man even though he was in prison for years. I think I understand him, and that's my goal now, is freedom, and that's to let go of all the harm and let go of all the harm you've done to others, and accept yourself for who you are, because who you are is not what you look like. Who you are is not at all. It has nothing to do with what you look like. Who you are is who you are on the inside, the beauty of you. Are you compassionate? Are you vengeful? If you're vengeful, then you're hurting yourself. I don't have a vengeful bone in my body, not that I know of. I have contacted people, I've talked to attorneys about what happened with the mental illness, and I told them I'm not looking to sue. And if I did sue, I don't have much money. I only got like $5,000 in the bank. My daughter went through at least $8,000 or $9,000 of my money, and she took all my furniture. She's got everything. She's got me dead, and I'm still breathing, And I could have pressed charges. I had a detective come to my house. I had bank records, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't put them in jail. But I'm kind of rambling a little bit, I have so much, from what has happened to me in my lifetime, and in the past 11 years. I feel that the past 11 years reverted me back to being that child again and remembering how I felt as a child, lots of fear and loneliness. And that's just what I felt for the past 11 years, fear and loneliness. Those were the main two things that were killing me. They were suffocating me. I was so afraid in those 11 years, I couldn't go out of the house without having anxiety, and I was on anxiety medicine. I would have anxiety just to have to go to the store. Now, how were they helping me? I was in and out of mental hospitals countless times in the 11 years. Oh, I couldn't count. At least 4 or 5 times a year, and it was horrific. It was horrific. I hated every minute of it. But I couldn't. I had I had no control over anything. The drugs had me under their spell, and everybody. I was begging for love. I tried very hard for my family to love me. I tried very hard. I got whatever little hugs I got. You know, I needed it so, so badly. Everybody needs to be loved, not for what they look like. It's irrelevant. It's for who you are inside, how you feel about yourself. Do you accept you for who you are? I think perfectionism is when we can admit that we're not perfect. I think that's perfectionism. I was born deformed. When I was in my young age, I was ugly and skinny and made fun of. And I mean, my nickname was Worm. I was picked on. I was bullied. And then when I hit 14, I started developing in them same boys that treated me worse than a dog wanted to date me. And I think that's when I was able to realize that, I was like the ugly duckling that kind of turned into a swan. Not saying that I was beautiful, but even at 65, I'm not a bad looking woman, and I'm not vain. It's just that I get compliments from men, you know. But I am not a loose woman, even though I was a prostitute and a heroin mainline user for 13 years of my life. I got off of it in 1985. I wanted to find a better life. I knew there was some kind of good in me because I was told I was a nobody. And I remember sitting by myself one night after doing heroin, after a night of all these drugs, and thinking, I know there's got to be something good in me. And I guess that began my search to find if there was, because my parents lied to me. They told me there wasn't. But I wonder who told them that they weren't any good either. You see, so that's why I don't blame them. They've been injured too by their childhood. I know they were abused. I know it in my heart and my soul, and that's why I love them so deeply. We also, in order to be able to heal, if we have animosity towards our parents, and we have this, a lot of kids, they have this idea in their head of what they think a mother should be and what a grandmother should be. My daughter had it with me. She wanted me to be the grandmother that sits on the porch, takes care of my grandkids, and lets her go out and party. Really, I'm supposed to be that little old lady in the rocking chair, that's just happy to be with my grandkids. Well, that's not who I am. And I can't be something I'm not. I just can't. And I wasn't. I was true to myself. To thine own self be true, whether anybody likes it or not. You know, I was not very tolerant with young children, and that's most likely because when I was growing up, the children that I can't tolerate now were my age, and they treated me like crap. So yeah, I have a problem with children, and I know where it comes from. I'm just not one of those little old grandmothers that sit on the porch and have all their grandkids. Kids drive me crazy, you know. Oh, what a cute little baby. Yeah, they're cute little babies till you get them home. you know. It's not easy raising a child. My daughter bragged about before she became a grandmother. Oh, when I become a grandmother, I'm going to take my grandkids every week so that I give the parents a break. And I thought to myself, she really doesn't realize that she cannot say what hasn't happened yet, because she doesn't know until she walks in those shoes how she's going to react. You know, do not judge if you haven't walked in my shoes, and she finally got to walk in my shoes. And guess what? She's not that grandmother that takes her grandkids every week. She barely takes them every couple months. It's unbelievable. People really think they're going to be better than their parent was. And, we forget one thing. We shouldn't be striving for perfection. We should be striving for honesty. When we make mistakes, admit it. Why hide it? Tell our children the truth about ourselves. Let them know who we are. Play songs from, say, your generation to your children, because some of those songs especially I'm talking about the favorite songs of your parents. You get to see a little bit of how they felt on the inside, as who they were as a person, not what they looked like, not the way they acted, because sometimes a person can be lonely and they react in anger, you know, they react in anger, and they're not really expressing what their true feelings are. But in song, we can find out how they were really feeling. Were they insecure? Why were they so mean to us? Why? That's the question. Why? And when we can find the answer as to why they were so mean to us, maybe we find out there's actually a rose behind our parents that we didn't know existed. Anyway, there's a song I used to sing. I'm not a good singer anymore, but I still like to sing songs, and I don't sing very often anymore. My voice is gone. I used to